So do you guys eventually look for sponsors to be more self-sustaining, or do you think you would keep like hoping that how do you think funds will keep being generated like down the road?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of research on the affordability of podcasts. For the most part, a lot of the necessary funds would come from equipment. So that would be more of a one-time fee, unless there's like maintenance needed for the equipment, but there's a lot of free equipment that is available on campus, so that wouldn't be too much of an issue. In terms of guest speakers, we've allocated a large portion of our budget, it's not up there right now, but we've allocated, I think, about $2,000, is that correct? For guest speakers, so we would hope that that would sustain it for a while. And if we ran out of money in our budget for guest speakers, we're also interested in inviting professionals from Purdue's campus, so hopefully they would be willing to talk to us for free or for a smaller amount, but we would also like to put that budget towards bringing in really prominent professionals that are outside Purdue as well.
And if this picks up, CAPS would maybe foot the bill as well if it became popular.
Yeah.
So I know there's probably a lot of podcasts out there about stress and stuff. How does this one differ from those?
Yeah, so there actually are some podcasts out there specifically for, if you're dealing with anxiety, or there are even some specifically for college students. But the goal of this podcast is to meet Purdue students' needs in particular, because not every college or college student is exactly the same, and seeing as Purdue is one of the top 5 public universities in the entire country, our students are definitely under a lot of stress, and maybe other students don't need as specific of help that Purdue students might need. So we would want to research a lot of that, find out what Purdue students need the most, and then bring that to the Purdue community.
And also, it's another thing we want to create with these podcasts is more sense of community, like we're all in this together. So just to make sure you feel like you're not alone, and specifically just Purdue students.
So, is this podcast going to be mainly for college students, or would you think about in the future expanding it to the entire Purdue County?
In general, we want to begin with it just with how Purdue students are either struggling with depression or stress or anxiety, that kind of thing, to make it more personal for them. But the whole objective of this podcast is to help people, give them additional resources on where to go, how to deal with if they're stressed one day, give them meditation advice for it. So it's to ultimately contribute to the entire West Lafayette and Lafayette community, and also give them the resources that are available to them besides just going to a mental health professional.
Yeah, there'll be sections where it's not just about Purdue students. Like, for example, we'll have meditation weeks. It could apply to anyone, basically.
So knowing that CAPS is very busy and kind of understaffed, is there any indication that they'll be able to have the manpower or time to support you guys?
Yeah, so we're not solely depending on CAPS to bring in their professionals to speak on our podcast. We're hoping to get faculty from the psych department, and to reach out from beyond Purdue's campus and get other professionals. And this is also something that we hope will be picked up by students and supported by students. So eventually down the road, maybe since this is a huge STEM school, a lot of kids are probably interested in broadcasting. Getting students together to support and to run a kind of club that would keep this project going. So we wouldn't solely be relying on CAPS, because, yeah, I agree, they're too understaffed to put this entire thing upon them, on top of having appointments with students. So we would like them to be a part of it, but we're not going to put the entire project on CAPS.
And there are a lot of resources that we don't exactly need people for. Like if they have information, statistics about mental health, that's something we can get from CAPS, and they'd be very willing to give without having to send over someone specifically.
In addition to that, we had mentioned that we wanted to work with the Bryan Lamb School of Communication Communication and ComCares. So we would look to them more for publication of this podcast or more of the logistics behind publishing one versus using CAPS to partner with for professional advice and getting their professionals to come in and give their insight on this topic.
So you mentioned before that you wanted this to be a podcast that really specifically caters to the needs of the Purdue students. And just out of curiosity, what do you feel are the issues and problems that Purdue students have that doesn't exactly relate to a general college campus stress podcast?
Yeah, so like we were talking about before, seeing that Purdue is one of the best colleges, universities you could go to in the entire country, the amount of pressure and stress that are on our students here, and all in programs across the board, because all of our programs are well ranked, but all of that comes with a lot of extra work and lots of exams, lots of projects, internships, that kind of thing. So we're just looking to, we're expecting from our research that extreme stress, anxiety, all of that would be a predominant issue across the Purdue community. So we hoped to, through our research and presentation of this podcast, just to address those things specifically. So, not every school has an engineering program or has as many like STEM programs. So maybe targeting specific pockets of every single major and just trying to cater to the needs of our specific students and looking into what our students have on their plates versus other universities who might not have as much of a workload or as many exams, different types of programs, just trying to get specific with Purdue students.
And going off of that, rather than identifying specific Purdue specific problems, because we all know college students are stressed in general. We're trying to find Purdue specific solutions. There's an event today that could help you, or you could go down to the Silver Dipper and they have half off ice cream. So things like that specific, just solutions in general for stress at Purdue.
Because you guys are talking about such sensitive topics, are you planning on listing trigger warnings or anything like that, before you speak or on the thing? Because I know are you gonna add something in later or something like that?
Depending on the topic of the week and how the amount of time we'll be talking about it, and just the seriousness of it, we'll definitely have trigger warnings or things to make sure that the listeners know that that this topic could be kind of sensitive.
I was just about to say the same thing, essentially. That we'll have a layout for what the podcast would be. A lot of podcasts have descriptions on any form of medium that you can think of. And if students think they should avert this certain topic, they can just read the description and they would be less inclined to listen to it.
So is this, I think you guys kind of mentioned this earlier, but is it supposed to be in addition to other outside help, or is it something that they can just do on their own, just with this, or what?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the person. The issue that we really saw with CAPS is that it is unable to, just due to understaffing, unable to address the needs of every student in a timely fashion. So we hope that this podcast can maybe help people who are waiting for CAPS, or just help people who are going through a rough patch and maybe don't need to pay for therapy appointments or use up their CAPS, a lot of CAPS appointments, because we only have the 12. So we're just looking to support people who would need it and not necessarily replace CAPS, but if needed, case by case. Yeah.
Admittedly, I'm not a podcast expert, but from the ones that I've seen, they tend to be pretty long. So with your time span is 10 minutes, right?
Yes.
So with the time span of 10 minutes, are you worried that you'll have to sacrifice any of the normal characteristics of a podcast, maybe having it not be as conversational or something like that?
Yeah. So the whole goal with the 10-minute time span is that it'll get the information out there in enough time and it won't lose anyone's focus, because we're really just trying to help out students. And our goal is, since this project would be ongoing, it wouldn't just be a couple podcasts and then we're done. We could definitely revisit certain topics, like you can't cover all of depression in one 10-minute podcast, but maybe just diving deep into specific symptoms and specific treatments, different kinds of research, doing those like meditative podcasts like we talked about. So yeah, we would really focus on like something small rather than trying to squeeze everything and all of these conversations into one podcast.
And it's also beneficial for students because, I mean, I think all of us can personally say, like, we don't really have like 2 hours to allocate to just listening to something. So that 10-minute break would be really nice if you're just listening to something and then kind of like move on with your day too.
The counselors at CAPS, they have to go through a lot of trainings and practices actually to become sort of certified. So how are you going to handle, or how are you going to frame the clinical aspect of a counseling session versus the informational, or maybe clinical if you do questions and answers, right, online. So how would you reconcile that? Or will it turn into sort of CAPS counseling online, or these are two separates, or what are your takes on that?
So I think what we're trying to do is just, if we have a question, we have reliable sources that students could depend on, like such as CAPS and the information that they gather from there. Because students are already looking for help from CAPS, so if they have information from that service, then we tend to be very reliant on it. And even if it's not the source of CAPS, it could be anything else.
Yeah, and going off of that, so essentially the whole point of therapy is not only to get answers to your questions and get facts, get statistics, get information on treatment. It's also to talk about your issues and ask questions. So that is really why we implemented the question and answer podcast every so often, having that, so that not only is this a service that we're just kind of giving out to people, but it's something that they can put back into the service, and people can ask questions that might benefit more people, because obviously if somebody has a question about their mental health, there's more than likely someone else struggling with it. So yeah, it's kind of just a way to take a therapy session and just sort of make it public and make it accessible to everyone, and really broaden that scope, so it's sharing the wealth of the resources that CAPS provides.
Yeah.
So do you guys ever feel like that you're gonna run into the same topics and eventually listeners will kind of feel that you guys are more repeating yourselves, where the topics are they might be different but they seem very similar versus how it started at the end? Do you guys ever feel like this podcast series could be completed?
Theoretically it could, but I see it being pretty unlikely. We always have new problems arising in campus. There's just various things that are always going on in people's lives that have never been experienced before, and that's always something we could address just every week. And if we did run out of content, then it'd be fine to take a break or something. And until there was new things to talk about that were relevant, we would continue at that point.
And also, going off of that, just like how like a broken leg isn't healed in like 2 weeks, at least I don't think so. It would take a while to get better mentally. So like another reason why we like want to do podcasts is because you could repeat certain episodes, just like to retain the information a little better and just have some more assurance throughout.
Yeah, and just as like one final nod to this, the Purdue student body is constantly changing. People graduate and new students come in and people transfer in, so we're looking to create a dynamic podcast that can change over time as Purdue changes.